So for those of you already familiar with this video series, you can just skip the introduction. But otherwise, welcome to DubsTech. We are a UW ISO for diversified tech fields, and we aim to bring the coolest tech to everyone. About this coding intro workshop, here you are expected to learn how to code in Python and hopefully also to explore your interest in coding. There will be new workshops. There will be new projects for every workshop, and all you need to do is to bring a laptop. There'll be no rushing, no homework, and no stress. How this workshop works. So at the beginning of the session, I'm going to show you how the finalized project works. And then I'm going to talk about the general aspects behind it. I'm going to break the program down so that you understand better. And then I'm going to walk you through the coding step by step. And that's it. Everyone will get their projects completed. And please show your projects to your friends and help us grow. So if you're new to this workshop or if you're missing a session, you can refer to the link on the screen, and there you can find all the past PowerPoints and completed workshop projects. And if you attend the workshop in person, I will also be able to help you in coding sessions and via email. So today we're doing a game called Guess a Number. Without further ado, let me show you the game in action. So let's clear the shell and restart the program again. Guess a number between 1 and 100. Let's try 50. Too low, guess again. 75. Too high, guess again. 70. Still too high. Before we continue the game, I want you to purposely mess up the program and see how it handles with bad inputs. So let's take 10,000 bad input. So you can see that the program is designed to handle with those bad inputs. So let's try again. What about 65? Still too high. 60, too high. 55, too high. Okay, 54. You got it in 7 guesses. Thanks for playing. And that's the game. So before we move on, I want you to think about what does the program need to do? How does it choose a random number between 1 and 100 before the game starts? And then how does it ask the user the questions again until the user gets it? And also, how does it remind the user of whether their guess is too high or too low relative to the number that the game chooses? And how does it remember the number of guesses the user makes and then output the number at the very end of the game? Here's the breakdown. So in order to take input from the user console and also output the messages, we're going to need IO, and that's the generic part of Python. We do not need to write the codes. It's there. We just need to use it. Also, we're going to use IfL to compare the numbers of the user guesses compared to our own generated random number at the beginning of the gaming session. And so we also need to generate this response based on the random numbers. That is also generic. We just need the print commands. And also we need this restricted while loop. So ignoring the bad inputs for now, if the user is so inefficient that he had to literally guess from 1 to 100, and if the number is 100, so the while loop will only run for 100 times. So this is guaranteed to exit in 100 times. So although we don't have to write a specific restriction, we understand from the nature of the while loop that it is restricted, so it's not going to be infinite by any chance. So we don't have to worry too much about that. So let's get started. So now I want you to think about the overall flow of the program. So at the beginning, the program keeps asking the user for their guesses until they get it right. In order to do that, we're going to generate a random number in the beginning. We also need a Boolean variable as the condition for the while loop to continue running. And we want to call that guessed number and keeps it false. So we want to initialize it as false to indicate that number is not guessed yet. And we only change it to true until we have a correct guess from the user. And that's the end of the game. And we also need to deal with bad inputs as shown in the demo previously. So now let's get started with the game. I want you to I want you to create a new Python file called guessNumber.py and work on a new method called a random number. This will be very similar to getResponse that you've worked in workshop 1 and 2. But this time I want you to create the random numbers to be within the range of 1 to 100. Let me pause the video now. I will show you how to do it shortly. So let's create a new file, and without further ado, let's save it in the workspace. We'll call it guessNumber. I want to replace it, and here we go. So let's define this random number method. Number, right? And we want to return random. That random dot is indicating that we are using a random class of that Python provides. So in order to use that built-in Python class, we're gonna import random from the Python library. And that's it. So far, so good. So we've talked also that we gotta deal with bad inputs. And so here's how you can break down what a guess should be regarded as legal. So that the guess, first and foremost, it has to be a digit. So we're going to use guess.isDigit. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Python methods, or you don't know how I came up with isDigit, I suggest you go back to workshop 2. And it's a good practice to Google or search on Stack Overflow about this methods, this generic functions that Python that you think that Python would provide. And also the guess after converting back to integer, it has to be within the range of 1 to 100. And now I want you to work on your isNumberValid method. Note that this method takes one parameter, num. Let me pause the video now. All right, here we go, working our second method. Define a isNumberValid num. Want to return num.isDigit, and so the and brings these two conditions in parallel, so that both of them have to be true in order for this isNumberValid to return true. If one of them is false, and this will just return false. So if the number is digit but it's like a 10,000, then this will be false. But if the number is not digit at all, then this method will stop immediately. This is the short circuit execution. And if you want to know more about it, I suggest you go back to workshop 2. All right, so we have these two helper methods up and running. And now we want to work on our main methods. And so let's start again. So you can ignore this thing on the slides right now, but I want you to create the main method and also write the shortcut on it, and be prepared to initialize a random number, and also the Boolean variable guess number, and initialize it to be false. And I also want you to create a new string called guess, and give it an input message prompt saying that, oh, I want to guess a number between 1 and 100. And finally, so after you have the random number set up, after you have the Boolean variable guess number set up, and also the guess, it's like an input. And we also want a counter, name it as num guesses, and initialize it to be 0. Let me pause the video now. Okay, here we are coding the main method. without further ado, I want you to write at the very end a shortcut. And as we discussed, we want to create a new random number each time we run the main method. And we initialize guessed number to be false, so that indicates that the number is not guessed yet. And also a get user guess and taking inputs from the shell, and the prompt message would be guess a number between 1 and 100. And num guesses is equal to 0. And then we will be prepared to write our while loop here. So that's it. So now let's switch gears to the PowerPoints again. So we're about to write the while loop, but then we know that while loop only runs when the Boolean condition is true. But we set the guess number to be initially false to match our intuitively thinking. So how do we fix that? Well, the opposite of false, not false, is true. So we would just begin by while not guess number. So not guess number, that will be true. And if guess number is turned to be true at the very end, if the user actually guesses the correct one, then not true will be false, and while it will stop. So we have the method that returns whether the input we have is illegal or not. But then how do we actually utilize that method in the while loop? So we check every time when the user inputs a new number. Here's the basic outline on the PowerPoints. So if the guess is not valid, then we warn the user about a bad input. We ask for another guess, and then we continue the loop. And else, if the guess is valid, then we actually compare the guess with the number the program randomly picked. All right. So how can we tell the Python to just continue the loop, continue to the next iteration of the while loop when we have a bad input? Well, the word continue almost comes naturally. So we have the code on the PowerPoint. If the number is not valid, then you start to take the you start to initialize the guess again, and you tell Python to continue to the next iteration of the while loop using the word nothing but continue itself. So let's do that in the while loop. While not guessed number, if not is number valid, guess is equal to input, bad input, guess a number between 1 and 100, and continue. Else, we know the number the user guess is legal, continue the comparison. All right, here we go. So now we want to compare the numbers knowing that they are actually legal. But then we also want to keep track of the number of guesses. So that's why we have before the while loop integer called num guesses and set it to be 0. And then at the very when we know that this guess is legal, we want to increment num guesses by 1, so that it indicates a new guess, a new correct legal guess, whether it's correct or not, that's being recorded. So we do not just record a guess that's not legal. All right. And then knowing that the guess is legal, we want to convert in guess back to in the integer form. And then we can actually run the comparisons. If the guess is less than the number we generated, then we warn the user about the guess being too low. And else, if the guess is greater than the number, then we warn the guess about being too high. And else, when we reach the else condition right here, we know that guess is equal to number by the if else logic. So then we print a little victory message and also the time of guesses. And in order to stop the loop, stop the while loop from running again, we set guess never to be true. So while not true will be evaluated to be while something is false. So that will not be running again. So as you may have discovered, we have this multiple IfL structure. And so at the very beginning of the while loop, we have if bad input, then we print an error message and ask for a new set of input. Else, then we start to compare the numbers, and there will be another series of if else. So we have a multiple if else structure right there. And in real world coding, it's best not have more than two. Two is okay. But more than two, the logic will be very hard to follow, and you may lose track very easily. So use those conjunction words like not, and, or as much as you can. So let's write things up, and don't forget to print a thank you message at the end of the main. You may pause the video now and try to work on the number of comparisons in the else statement. And you may pause the video now. So we are back again. As we've discussed it, we want to increment num guesses by 1 since this is a legal guess that's being recorded. And then we want to, and then we want to convert guess back to the integer form since guess is taken from the user input, and that is string by default. So let's compare the numbers. If guess is less than a number, guess will be taken as input again. Too low, guess again. Else if the guess is greater than a number, guess would be equal to input too high, guess again. And else we know then the two numbers are equal, and guess would be we don't have to do that, sorry about that. We just need to print the little victory message. You got it in num guesses. And yep, we want to set guessed number to be true. So that indicates the number is being guessed, and while loop, this not will convert guess number to be false, and just while loop will just stop. All right, and a little thank you message. Thank you for playing. Now I want to include this thank you message just to show you that indication is everything to Python. So you see this print has only one tab, one indentation before it, and so is the while loop, so that you know these two run in parallel. So once the while loop stops, then the thank you message will get printed to the console. So so this multiple IfL structure, you see that it has double indentation and triple within it, so that it's layer by layer by layer. So that's run it, and it appears to be working. So you might have seen at the very end of this coding session that we sometimes have this weird phrase that you got it in one guesses. And how can we fix that? Well, we could write a built-in if-else inside the print command. This will be optional, but I have the code written out, and you can study the code in guessnumber2.py. So at the end of this video, I want you to reflect a little bit. So we did not use global variables this time. If we use something like low number and high number, it will make possible of users customization. So it does not have to start from 1 and end strictly with 100. It can be more flexible if the user wants like a larger range or short range. We can make that happen with global variables very easily. Sure, the codes will get longer, but it will be more general. So again, use global variables whenever you find yourself repeatedly initializing the same variable, or give the variables inside your codes some integer values that you find yourself using again and again. And let me show you the code. So let's stop and run. Enter lowest number, 1. Enter highest number, also 1. A number between 1 and 1 has to be 1 then. You got it in one guess. So you see, the problem is fixed with this built-in structure right here. So that will be all today. And thank you for watching. I will see you in workshop 4, where we make our own MATLAB. And have a good day. Bye.